Once upon a time, there was a sweet girl who was loved by everyone, but most of all by her grandmother. The grandmother was always uncertain what to give to her as a gift. One day, she gave the girl a cap made of red velvet. The cap suited her so well that she didn't want to wear anything else, and hence she was known as Little Red Riding Hood. One day, her mother asked Little Red Riding Hood to take some wine and cookies to her grandmother, who was ill and weak. Her mother instructed her to be quick, to not stray from the path, and to be careful. Little Red Riding Hood set off for her grandmother's house, located half an hour away from the village in the forest. Upon entering the forest, she encountered a wolf. Unaware of his wicked nature, she did not fear him. The wolf inquired where she was going and what she was carrying. Naively, Little Red Riding Hood shared the details about her grandmother's house and the food she was carrying. The wolf, realizing that the young girl would be a tastier meal than the old woman, plotted to eat both. He distracted Little Red Riding Hood by pointing out the beauty of the forest, which led her to stray from the path to pick flowers for her grandmother. Meanwhile, the wolf went to the grandmother's house, swallowed her, and dressed in her clothes, lying in her bed. When Little Red Riding Hood arrived, the wolf, disguised as the grandmother, swallowed her too. A passing huntsman heard the wolf snoring loudly inside and decided to investigate. Realizing the situation, the huntsman saved both Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother by cutting open the wolf's stomach. They filled the wolf's stomach with stones, and when he tried to rise, he collapsed and died. In the end, everyone was happy. The huntsman took the wolf's fur, the grandmother recovered, and Little Red Riding Hood vowed to never stray from the path and to heed her mother's advice.
Once upon a time, on a cold and dark winter night, a little match girl named Elya stood shivering under the street lamps. She was trying to earn a living by selling her last matches. While people around her spent time in warm rooms at their homes in peace, Elya was left out in the open and alone. With her freezing fingers, she pulled out her last match and struck it. Suddenly, the match ignited and lit up the surroundings. With the glow of the match, Elya drifted into her world of imagination. With the first light, she started looking through a window. Inside, there was a warm room. A Christmas tree, decorated with colorful ornaments, was shining brightly. A happy family, including a father, mother, and a little girl, were chatting and singing joyfully. Elya watched the family's happiness with a warm feeling growing inside her. Then another match was lit. This time, Elya found herself at a dining table set for a magnificent feast. The table was filled with delicious foods, colorful fruits, and sweets. People gathered in love and joy, enjoying a pleasant evening together. Elya's stomach growled as she hadn't eaten for a long time, but she just watched the table. Elya had one last match in her hand. She struck it, and the match glowed again. This time, she found herself next to a warm stove. The stove, with its dancing flames, promised warmth. Elya tried to warm her hands around the stove, but the match burned out completely and its light faded. Elya found herself back in the cold winter night under the street lamp. She had no matches left, and the cold was still biting. However, she carried the warmth and hope of her dreams within her. She etched the beauty she saw in the light of the matches into her heart and believed that her life would now have more hope and love. Elya, eager to wake up to a new day filled with hope, continued to walk the streets. Because in her life, no matter what, she realized that nothing could extinguish the hope inside her. One day, a merchant received news that his ships had sunk in a violent storm. The poor man lost everything he owned, leaving only his small house in the town. Two greedy sisters did not like this situation at all. They became lazy, lying in bed and grumbling, leaving all the housework to Beauty. After some time, the merchant heard that one of his lost ships had arrived at the port. Before setting out to find out if the news was true, he asked his daughters what gifts they would like him to bring back. The spirits of the two greedy sisters lifted immediately. "Dresses and jewels," they said. "And you, Beauty?" the merchant asked. "Just a rose. That's enough for me," said Beauty. A few days later, the merchant set off to return home, sad and poor again because he had lost the money from the last ship to swindlers. Not knowing where he was going, the merchant and his horse trudged through the snow for hours until he suddenly saw a very beautiful castle with bright lights shining out of the windows. Finally, realizing that waiting was pointless, he tied his horse in the stable and ate the food waiting for him on a long table in the hall. Then he went to sleep in a bed. When he woke up in the morning, he found new clothes laid out for him. A nice breakfast was waiting for him downstairs. As the merchant was leaving the castle, he noticed the roses in the garden. "At least I should keep my promise to Beauty," he thought to himself. He picked one of the roses. But as soon as he did, a terrible roaring filled the air. A fearsome beast emerged from behind the bushes. It was so terrifying that the merchant nearly fainted from fear. "You ungrateful man," roared the beast. "I saved your life. I fed you, clothed you, and you steal my beautiful roses. You deserve to die right now." The merchant fell to his knees before the beast. "I was taking the rose for one of my daughters, sir," he said. "Go, ask your daughters if one of them will live with me in exchange for your life. If none accept my offer, you will die within 3 months." At home, the two selfish sisters did not care as they listened to their father recount his terrifying adventures. They were furious that their father had not brought them clothes and jewels. But Beauty did not react like them. "Father, let me go," she said without hesitation. 3 months later, the merchant went to the castle with Beauty. The beast appeared. Beauty began to shiver with fear because the beast was as terrifying as her father had described. "Did you come here of your own free will?" asked the beast. "Yes," said Beauty. "Then your father will leave in the morning and he will never come back here." When her father left in the morning, Beauty was left alone. She cried for a while, but then she remembered a dream she had and felt a bit better. In her dream, a fairy had said, "Do not worry. The courage you've shown to save your father's life will not go unrewarded." Then she explored the castle. She was surprised to find a door with her name written on it. She opened it and looked inside. The room was furnished exactly as she wished, filled with books and musical instruments. She picked up a book. On the book, in golden letters, it read, "My dear Queen, your wish is my command. I wish I could see my father right now," Beauty said out loud. As soon as she said this, her father's image appeared in a mirror on the far side of the room. This way, Beauty's feelings of loneliness and homesickness were somewhat alleviated. That night at dinner, the beast appeared. "May I watch you, Beauty? You are the owner here." "No, my castle is at your command." The beast hesitated for a moment. "Do you find me very ugly?" Beauty looked up at the beast. "I didn't want to say it, but I must be honest." "Yes, I find you ugly," she said. The beast asked, "Will you marry me?" "No, beast, never." Every night at 9, the beast would come to talk to Beauty. Beauty began to get used to the beast as days went by. She even started to worry about him when he was late. If only, she thought, he wasn't so ugly. If only he didn't ask me to marry him over and over. One day, Beauty saw in the mirror that her father was sick. She immediately told the beast she wanted to go to see her father. "You may go, Beauty, but you know I will die of grief if you do not return, don't you? I fear you will want to stay with your father and not come back. But if you change your mind and want to return, just place your ring on the table next to your bed. You will wake up in my castle in the morning." The next morning, Beauty woke up in her father's house. Her father was overjoyed to see her. That day, her sisters, who had recently married, came to visit their father. When they arrived home and saw their beloved sister, they were green with envy. "Let's play a trick on her, make her stay a week longer, then the beast will come and kill her." The two sisters tearfully told Beauty they did not want to part with her. Beauty decided to stay another week. Beauty realized she missed the beast as much as she missed her father. One day, she dreamed of the beast lying stiff and lifeless in the castle's garden. She immediately took off her ring and placed it on the table beside her bed. When she woke up, she was in the beast's castle. She waited for the beast that evening. He did not come. Suddenly worried, she ran out of the castle into the garden. The beast was lying there, stretched out. She ran to him. The beast's heart was still beating. "I thought you would not return. I was prepared to starve myself to death. But I love you, beast. I want to marry you." At that moment, the castle seemed to become even more beautiful and radiant. Beauty looked around for a while, then turned back to the beast. But the beast was no longer there. In his place stood a young and handsome prince. "I want the beast," Beauty cried. The prince then stood up. "The beast is me," he said. "A wicked fairy had cast a spell on me, turning me into a creature so ugly that no one could bear to look at me. If you had not said you wanted to marry me, I would have remained like that until the end of my life." Before long, Beauty and the Beast were married. They became the happiest prince and princess the world had ever seen.
Many years ago, in a town called Nottingham, there was a very large forest. The name of this forest was Sherwood. The hero of this story, Robin Hood, was also a man who lived in this forest. Robin Hood used to live alone in the forest. When he was still very young, a wealthy man with a lot of money deceived him. Robin Hood was very angry about this. He decided to become an enemy of anyone who unfairly earned money and had a lot of wealth. One day, when he grew up, he made a promise to himself that he would steal their money and distribute it to the rich. Robin Hood, who was very skilled in using a bow and arrow, became famous in the forest where he lived. He started taking money from the rich who passed through there with his bow and arrow and distributing it to the poor, becoming very renowned. The situation had become a big problem for both the wealthy individuals and the sheriff of Nottingham. They wanted to capture and punish Robin Hood. They had even put a reward on his name. The sheriff of Nottingham had announced a substantial reward for anyone who could capture and bring Robin Hood to him. However, Robin Hood was not alone. He had many friends who loved him dearly. Whenever someone attempted to capture him, his friends would quickly alert him. Thanks to this, no one could capture Robin Hood. This situation started spreading and becoming a bigger problem over time. One day, it reached the ears of the king. The king decided to help capture Robin Hood immediately and sent a few of his men to the town of Nottingham. After a while, the king's men also arrive in the town and decide to make a plan with the sheriff's men. The plan will be like this: a big archery competition, open to everyone in the town, will be organized, and it will be announced that a great prize will be awarded. The king and the sheriff think that Robin Hood won't be able to resist participating in this competition. Indeed, as they thought, as soon as Robin Hood hears about the competition, he decides to participate for sure. Then some time passes, and the day of the competition arrives. 10 contestants participate in the competition, and after 10 rounds of arrow shooting, the archer who emerges victorious will be declared the winner. They try to warn Robin Hood and dissuade him, but Robin Hood is determined to participate in the competition. The sheriff keeps a close watch and begins searching for Robin Hood. He asks those around him about his whereabouts. However, those who have come to watch the competition mention that Robin Hood has red hair, and there is no one among the contestants with red hair. Throughout the first 9 rounds of the competition, an unknown man dressed in green wins all the rounds, despite not having red hair and being unrecognized by anyone. The spectators eagerly await the green-clad archer. The archer in green draws his bow and releases the arrow. The arrow splits William's arrow in half and hits the target right in the center. Everyone is holding their breath, watching the competition. Upon witnessing this spectacle, the audience erupts into applause. They eagerly await to find out who the contestant is. Meanwhile, the archer turns towards the sheriff's location and releases 2 arrows. One strikes to the right of the sheriff, and the other to his left. The sheriff, caught in between the 2 arrows and bewildered, doesn't know what to do. In the meantime, the archer in green looks at him, takes off his wig, and tosses it aside, revealing his red hair underneath. The sheriff jumps to his feet and orders his men to capture him. However, after Robin Hood tosses the wig and makes a lightning-fast move, he escapes so quickly that everyone is left stunned. Robin Hood eludes capture once again. The sheriff also doesn't achieve what he had hoped for at the end of the competition. The king becomes very angry. However, the legend of Robin Hood lives on.
Once upon a time, in a land of kingdoms, there lived a king and a queen. The king had a child. To celebrate the birth of his newborn, he threw a feast for all the people. After the feast, the king shared with those around him how happy being a father made him, as he and his wife had long awaited a child. He then amused all the guests by telling them about his recent experiences of learning to change the baby's diaper. When it was time for the guests to give their gifts to the baby princess, each one presented theirs. After everyone had given their gifts,
It was the turn of 12 fairies. "My gift to the princess is happiness," said the first fairy. The guests applauded joyously, and the king was overjoyed. "My gift is beauty," said the second fairy. "My gift is intelligence," said the third. Thus, 11 fairies gave their gifts one by one. As the 12th fairy was about to give her gift, the whole palace shook with a thunderous noise. The doors burst open, and an old woman entered, dragging her feet. Everyone closed their eyes in fear at the sight of her. "The 13th fairy!" they all shouted in unison. The 13th fairy approached the princess's cradle. The baby cooed and reached out her little hand towards the fairy. Then suddenly the fairy said, "My gift to the princess is that on her 15th birthday, as soon as she pricks her finger on a needle, she will die." And she laughed wickedly. With another thunderous noise, the evil fairy disappeared. The palace doors slammed shut. A dreadful silence followed. Then the queen began to cry. The 12th fairy stepped forward. "I might not be able to break the curse, but I can alter it." The baby grew into a healthy, beautiful, young woman. The king and queen had long forgotten the curse, but she discovered a door she had never noticed before. Opening it, she found a staircase winding upwards. At the top, there was a door with a golden key. Upon opening the door, she saw an old woman inside a small room, spinning something on a wheel. The old woman. "Don't just stand there. Come, try it yourself." The woman extended the needle towards the princess. The sharp point of the needle pricked the princess's finger, and she collapsed to the ground. The entire palace fell into a deep sleep. Years slowly passed. The palace was forgotten. A handsome prince was passing by. He noticed a place covered in thorny bushes, and he drove his horse towards the thorny path. He drew his sword and began to cut through the bushes. He came across a tower with a half-open door. He found a winding staircase leading upwards. The prince climbed the stairs. He found himself in front of the princess. "Sleeping Beauty," he whispered. Overwhelmed by her beauty, he leaned down and kissed her forehead. The moment the prince kissed her, the princess opened her eyes. With her awakening, the princess saw the prince standing before her. For the first time in 100 years, a smile appeared on her lips. "Will you marry me?" the prince asked softly. "Yes," said the princess and kissed the prince. The prince and princess got married and lived happily ever after.
In the early 1930s, during a hard time called the Great Depression, Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow met. This meeting started a famous story in American history. They felt a strong connection right away, even though it was a tough time with many problems. Bonnie and Clyde became not just lovers, but also crime partners. They planned their crimes carefully. In a dark room, with maps and notes, they worked together by candlelight. They talked quietly about their plans. They started doing more crimes. One night they robbed a gas station. It was very tense. Clyde had a gun and watched for danger while Bonnie took money from the register. They were both excited and scared. But doing crimes had bad results. Clyde went to prison. It was a very hard place. Wanting to be free, he made a painful choice. He hurt his own toes. When Clyde got out of prison, he and Bonnie were very happy to see each other again. They hugged and were happy, even though their life was hard. Sadly, they had a bad car crash later. Clyde was badly hurt, and Bonnie had trouble walking. Their car was broken, like their plans. Their story ended suddenly. On May 23, 1934, police caught them by surprise. There was a lot of shooting, and that was the end of Bonnie and Clyde. They wanted to be buried together, but that didn't happen. Bonnie was buried by her family, and Clyde was buried near his brother. They were apart, even in death. Bonnie still wore a ring from another man, Roy, when she died. She also had a Bonnie and Clyde tattoo. These things showed their story and love, even after they were gone.
Once upon a time, there was a tall man living alone in a simple house. He had no one, so he spent most of his time reading night stories. One day, while reading a storybook from the town, he got an idea. He thought, why can't I be a knight like in the stories? Actually, being a knight is perfect for me. I have a horse, and if I get a spear, that's it. But knights have names. What should my name be? He started thinking. After a while, he stood up to go to his horse and said, I've got it. My name will be Don Quixote. Don Quixote, after spending some time with his horse, went to buy a spear from a blacksmith. After buying a spear, he rode his horse towards the east of the town. After a while, he met a man sitting alone by a stream. The man said, Sir, looking at your clothes, you seem like a noble knight. Don Quixote replied, I am a knight. My name is Don Quixote. The man said, Really? What a nice coincidence. I was looking for a noble knight to serve. My name is Salvador. Don Quixote smiled and said, Okay then, I accept you as my helper. Salvador, a knight needs adventure. Let's go. Don Quixote got on his horse and Salvador on his donkey. They crossed a wooden bridge over the stream and continued their journey. Soon, Don Quixote saw crows gathered and said, Salvador, wait here. I will defeat the enemy and come back. He charged towards the crows on his horse. He was going so fast that he didn't see the tree branches. He hit a branch and fell to the ground, getting hurt. Salvador picked him up and said, Did I defeat the enemy? Salvador replied, Yes, sir, and took him under a tree to treat his wounds. After resting, Don Quixote got up and said, Even if knights get hurt, they don't stop helping others. He rode his horse. When they saw two cats chasing a mouse, Don Quixote said, Salvador, there are those in need of help. Wait here and be careful. He got off his horse and ran towards the cats with his spear. He tripped over a stone and fell hard to the ground. Salvador helped him up and asked, What happened to me? Where are the enemies? Salvador said, The enemies ran away, sir. You fought many enemies today. It's getting dark. We need to find a place to spend the night. They spent the night in a cave they found and continued their journey early in the morning. At that moment, Don Quixote realized he couldn't be a knight. He returned home and spent the rest of his life reading night stories, just like before.
Once upon a time in a distant land, there lived a beautiful girl with her father and stepfamily. Her name was Cinderella. Her mother had passed away at a young age, so her father raised her alone. However, when her father remarried, Cinderella's life took a drastic turn. The new stepmother and her two daughters did not like Cinderella's presence. They were jealous of her beauty and kindness and treated her very cruelly. The stepmother made Cinderella work like a servant in the house and did not allow her to wear nice clothes. The stepsisters constantly belittled and mocked her. One day, Cinderella's father went on a long business trip. In his absence, the stepmother and daughters treated Cinderella even worse. They sent her to the worst corner of the attic and made her do all the household chores alone. Although Cinderella was very sad, she couldn't find the strength to oppose them. Over time, Cinderella's only friends became the mice in the attic and the birds that sang to her. On cold nights, she would secretly go down and sleep next to the extinguished fireplace for warmth. One day, big news spread in the town square. The prince was going to hold a grand ball at the palace, and all the young ladies of marriageable age were invited. The stepmother and daughters were thrilled upon hearing this and started preparing for the ball immediately. Cinderella also wanted to go to the ball, but her stepmother did not allow her. Moreover, by assigning her even more chores, she made it impossible for Cinderella to prepare for the ball. When the stepmother and sisters went to the palace, Cinderella was left alone and burst into tears. Just then, a fairy appeared and came to Cinderella's aid. The fairy gave her a magnificent ball gown and glass slippers with her magical powers. She also turned a pumpkin and mice into a luxurious carriage and white horses. However, there was one condition: Cinderella had to leave the ball before midnight, as all the magic would end at that hour. Thanks to the fairy, Cinderella attended the ball and caught everyone's attention. The prince fell in love with her at first sight. They danced together, and Cinderella was enchanted by the time spent with the prince. However, as midnight approached, Cinderella had to leave hastily. While escaping, she dropped one of her glass slippers on the stairs. The prince searched the entire country to find Cinderella and finally reached her home. The stepsisters tried on the slipper, but it fit none of them. In the end, Cinderella tried on the slipper, and it fit perfectly. The prince was overjoyed to find her again and proposed to her. Cinderella accepted, and they lived happily ever after, in happiness for the rest of their lives.
Once upon a time, in a forgotten corner of the world, there was a magical forest filled with mysteries. In the heart of the forest lived a young girl named Elya. Elya had a special ability to understand the language of the forest and to communicate with animals. One day, while wandering in the forest, Elya found an ancient map. The map showed the location of a hidden, forgotten kingdom deep within the forest. Elya followed the map, embarking on a journey into parts of the forest she had never known before. During her journey, she encountered a talking owl. The owl told Elya that she was the only one who could uncover the secret of the lost kingdom. However, first, she had to pass through 3 challenging trials. Elya's first trial was to cross the river of time. The waters of the river brought together the past and the future, bending time itself. The second trial was to climb the mountain of flames. At the summit of the mountain, an eternal fire burned. The last trial was to face her own fears in the forgotten valley. When Elya reached the banks of the river of time, she watched the flow of the water and saw how time bent and changed shape. According to an ancient legend, 4 talismans were hidden along the river. Each belonged to a different period of time. She found the first talisman hidden in the secret depths of a cave, among the dusty pages of the past. She discovered the second one shining with light on the roof of a city from the future. The third one was in the heart of a forest, carved into the trunk of a tree, with mysterious symbols. With each talisman she found, Elya brought them to the bank of the river of time and united them. This temporarily halted the flow of the river, allowing Elya to cross safely. Upon reaching the mountain of flames, Elya marveled at the majesty of the towering volcano. The climb to the summit tested her physical strength as well as her determination and courage. With each step, she faced the dangers of burning lava and ash clouds. At the summit, she found the legendary fire and read the magical words written in an ancient spellbook. These words allowed her to control the power of the fire. Stepping into the forgotten valley, Elya was confronted with the physical manifestations of her own fears. This dark valley harbored dangers not only from the outside world, but also from within. After successfully passing all the trials, Elya finally reached the remnants of the lost kingdom. Elya found a magical key that could restore the kingdom's former glory. Using the magical key, Elya restored the kingdom to its former splendor. The bond between the forest and the kingdom strengthened, and both worlds benefited from this. Elya was chosen as the guardian of the kingdom, and was now responsible for protecting the secrets of the forest.
Once upon a time, there was a poor old carpenter who lived in a small town. He made puppets for a living, and he always wanted to have a child. One day, he went to the forest and started looking for a log to make a puppet. As he was wandering in the forest, he suddenly found a log on the ground just like he wanted. He took the whole log to his workshop and started to carve it. As he carved, the log made a sound. Ah, ah, ah! Master Geppetto did not understand where the sound was coming from. As he carved the log, it slowly began to take shape. Its head, arms, and legs became clear. When the puppet was finished, he put it on the chair. He started sweeping the floor, and that's when the puppet started talking and moving. Master Geppetto could not believe what he saw. He was so happy that he now had a child of his own. Many years passed, and his son came of school age, but Master Geppetto had no money to send his child to school. So he sold his coat and gave the money to his son. With this money, he wanted him to buy a notebook and pencil and go to school. Pinocchio was singing his way to school. He was looking at people, passing by stores, and looking at the shop windows. Pinocchio saw a crowd of people ahead, and there was a huge tent set up, and he wondered what was inside. Pinocchio walked through the crowd and came to the entrance of the tent, and the guard at the door told him that if he didn't have money, he couldn't come in. Pinocchio remembered the money his father had given him and went inside. 2 puppets were dancing on the stage. Seeing them, Pinocchio said that they were made of wood like me, so he went up to them and danced with them. The spectators were angry with Pinocchio. They said, "Get away from there, we can't see." "What a beautiful wooden puppet," said the man who was moving the puppets from above. "This will make me a lot of money." When the show was over, he caught Pinocchio and locked him in a cage. Pinocchio was very sorry for not listening to his father. He cried, and a fairy appeared who saw that Pinocchio was sorry. The fairy helped Pinocchio because he was sorry and said, "I will get you out of here, but you will go to school." But Pinocchio had no money left. The fairy gave him his money back. Pinocchio was very happy and was walking on the road again, singing his way to school. When the fox and the cat saw Pinocchio standing on the side of the road, they wanted to play a trick on him and take his money. They asked Pinocchio where he was going with such singing. "I am going to school, but first I will buy pencils and notebooks from the stationery store." The fox said, "Do you have any money?" Pinocchio showed the money his father gave him. The fox said to Pinocchio, "If you give us the money, we will plant your money in the magic soil and you will have a money tree and you can pluck it from the tree whenever you need money." Pinocchio agreed to make money the easy way and gave all his money to the fox. When the fox and the cat left, the fairy appeared. She asked Pinocchio if he went to school but said that if you lied, she would punish you. Actually, the fairy knew the truth. Pinocchio said, "Of course I went to school and I bought pencils and notebooks from the stationery store." Pinocchio's nose grew longer as he lied. The more the fairy asked, the more Pinocchio lied, and his nose grew more than a meter long, until finally Pinocchio told the truth. The fairy put Pinocchio's nose back the way it was. Seeing Pinocchio's remorse, the fairy gave him his money back and told him to go to school. On his way to school, Pinocchio saw the man he had escaped from the circus. The man caught Pinocchio and threw him into the sea because he was angry with him. Pinocchio didn't sink because he was wooden and he started to swim. He liked this very much, and then a big whale swallowed him. He was helpless in the whale's stomach. Master Geppetto was very curious about Pinocchio. When Pinocchio didn't come home for days, he went looking for him. The fisherman who saw him on the seashore gave Master Geppetto his boat and told him that Pinocchio had fallen overboard, so he started looking for him in the sea. Suddenly, his boat sank and Master Geppetto sank into the water because he was old and could not swim. At that time, the giant whale that swallowed Pinocchio also swallowed Master Geppetto. Seeing Pinocchio crying inside the whale, Master Geppetto hugged his son, and at that moment the fairy came again. Seeing Pinocchio's regret, the fairy rescued them and took them ashore, and from then on Pinocchio never told a lie. One day when Pinocchio was sleeping, Fairy made him a real person. When Pinocchio woke up, he saw that he was a real person, and immediately went to his father and said, "Look, Dad, I'm a real person made of flesh and blood." His father was very happy to have a real child, and the two of them lived happily together for the rest of their lives. Once upon a time, in the depths of forgotten lands, there was a forest filled with mysteries. In the heart of this forest stood an ancient tower that had not been seen by anyone for centuries. The tower would only reveal itself in the moonlight and disappear with the first rays of the sun. This tower harbored a secret that no one had dared to uncover. One day, a poor peasant named Luna entered this forest, which was near her village. After losing her family to a disease, Luna had started to collect fruits and wood from the forest to survive. She didn't realize she had taken the wrong path until it was too late. As she walked, the color of the sky began to change, and the trees around her started to whisper. After a while, she found herself in front of the old tower. The door of the tower slowly opened, and Luna stepped inside. As she moved forward, curious, she saw a brightly shining book in the center of the tower. The cover of the book was written in an ancient language with words she could not understand. When Luna opened the book, she saw the words dancing in the air. These words gave her a mission.
Find your deepest desire. Only then can you reach true happiness.
Luna found herself in an adventure. After days of journeying, she found herself by the side of a magical lake. The waters of the lake shimmered in the moonlight. Shapes would appear on the surface of the water from time to time, then disappear. As she tried to solve the mystery of the lake, a figure rose from the surface of the water in front of Luna. This was the guardian of the lake, who asked Luna what her deepest desire was. Luna thought long and hard. She remembered her family, the loved ones she had lost. But a voice inside her said that this was not her true desire. Eventually, Luna realized that her desire was not only to be reunited with her loved ones, but also to make the world a better place. With this understanding, the guardian of the lake gave Luna a seed and guided her to plant it in the heart of the forest. When Luna planted the seed, a magical tree began to rise. As the tree grew, the forest came to life, diseases were healed, and the village was filled with hope again. When Luna realized she had created this miracle, She understood what true happiness meant.
Once upon a time, there was a miller who had 3 sons. When the miller died, he left the mill to his oldest son, the donkey to his middle son, and the cat to his youngest son. The youngest son was very upset. "What use is a cat to anyone?" he complained. "You can't even eat it." The cat heard this and immediately replied, "You will see that you have not inherited a bad thing, sir. If you give me an empty sack and a pair of boots, you will see what I can do." The surprised boy did as the cat asked. When the cat put on the boots, he stood in front of the mirror and admired himself. Then he went to the pantry, picked a fresh lettuce and a nice carrot, and headed to the forest. In the forest, he opened the sack, placed the lettuce and carrot inside, and hid behind a tree. Soon, a small rabbit, smelling the fresh vegetables, came to the sack, hopped inside, and the cat quickly tied the sack shut. But instead of taking the rabbit to his master, Puss in Boots went straight to the palace and asked to see the king. When he appeared before the king, he bowed and said, "Your Majesty, I bring you a gift from my master, the Marquis." The king was very pleased with this gift. For 3 months, Puss in Boots brought so many gifts to the palace that the king began to look forward to his visits. One day, the long-awaited day came. "Don't ask why, but this morning go to the river and bathe," Puss in Boots told his master. He knew that the king and his daughter, the princess, would pass by the river that morning. That morning, as the king's carriage passed near the river, Puss in Boots ran to them in a panic. "Help! Help!" he shouted. "My master, the Marquis, is drowning." The king immediately sent a troop of soldiers to the river, but Puss in Boots did not stop there. He told the king that while his master was swimming, thieves had stolen his clothes, though Puss in Boots himself had hidden them behind some bushes. The king quickly sent a suit for the Marquis. Surprised to be called a Marquis, the boy wisely kept silent. Once the Marquis was dressed, the king invited him into his carriage and introduced him to his daughter. The princess instantly fell in love with the well-dressed Marquis. Meanwhile, Puss in Boots ran ahead. Soon he came across some people cutting hay in a large field. "Listen to me," he shouted. "The king is coming this way. If he asks who owns these fields, say they belong to my master, the Marquis, or you will be chopped into pieces." Then he ran on and told the same thing to the people he met in a large wheat field and everyone else he encountered. When the king's carriage passed by, he asked everyone he saw, "Who owns these fields?" Each time he got the same answer. The king was amazed at how much land the Marquis owned. Meanwhile, Puss in Boots was busy at the ogre's castle. "Ogre," said Puss in Boots, trying not to show his disgust at the ogre's breath. "They say you also have incredible magical powers. Is that true?" "If they say so, it must be true," said the ogre humbly. "For example, they say you can turn into a lion at will," said Puss in Boots. No sooner had he said this than the ogre turned into a lion. Puss in Boots jumped onto a cupboard. When the ogre turned back into his original form, the cat climbed down. "Excellent," said Puss in Boots, "but it must be impossible for someone your size to turn into something as small as a mouse." "Impossible," laughed the ogre. "There is nothing I cannot do." The ogre immediately turned into a mouse, and Puss in Boots quickly gobbled him up. Then the king arrived at the ogre's castle. I'm sure you can guess who the castle now belonged to. Puss in Boots met the king's carriage on the road to the castle. "This way, please," he said. "A feast awaits you." By the end of the day, Puss in Boots' master, the Marquis, was engaged to the princess. A week later, they were married. Once upon a time, at the edge of a city, there was a mysterious forest that no one dared to enter. The forest was called the Shadow Forest, and the surrounding mist swallowed any light and sound, leaving its secrets hidden. According to legends, a creature lived deep within the forest, guarding it for centuries and keeping curious eyes and feet away. 3 friends from the city, Alex, Bella, and Charlie, loved these old legends. Every night they would gather and tell stories about the Shadow Forest and its secrets. One day they decided to solve the mystery themselves. After making preparations, the 3 friends set off for the forest on a Saturday morning with the daylight guiding their way. As they entered the forest, The mist surrounded them like shadows, and an eerie silence fell over them. Only the sound of their footsteps and a distant rustle could be heard. As they ventured deeper, the forest's atmosphere changed. The trees grew denser, shadows darker, and a chill filled the air. After some time, while following an unmarked path, they stumbled upon the ruins of an old mansion. The mansion pointed towards the heart of the forest. Along the way, they encountered forest inhabitants, curious squirrels, silent owls, and mysterious eyes watching them from afar. But what caught their attention the most were the strange sounds coming from the mansion. It was as if someone or something knew they were there and was watching them. When they reached the mansion's door, they had to make a decision. Should they go inside to uncover the mystery, or turn back to their safe city life? Curiosity outweighed fear, and they decided to enter. Inside, they found a world forgotten by time. Old furniture, portraits on the walls, and in the center, a dusty table surrounded by chairs. But the most intriguing thing was a faint light and whispers coming from deep within the mansion. As they followed the light and whispers, they found themselves in a library. In the middle of the library, a book lay open, its pages turning by themselves. As they approached, they realized the whispers were telling a story, the true story of the Shadow Forest. According to legend, the creature guarding the forest was actually an old wizard who was the spirit of the forest. The wizard had protected the forest and its inhabitants from the dangers of the outside world for centuries, but he had been waiting for truly brave and kind-hearted people to discover the forest's secrets. At the end of the story, the wizard spirit appeared before the three friends and told them they were chosen as the forest's new guardians. The wizard entrusted them with the task of protecting the forest and its secrets. In return, they would always be under the forest's protection. The three friends accepted this great responsibility and left the forest. When they returned to the city, they vowed to keep the secrets of the Shadow Forest and to share them only with those who were truly brave and kind-hearted. At night, as they lay in bed, the three friends could feel the breeze from the forest and hear the whispers of the wizard. And so, the story of the Shadow Forest and its guardians took its place among the legends. And tonight, before you fall asleep, listen to the mysterious whispers around you. Maybe you have a message from the Shadow Forest. Good night. Alex, Bella, and Charlie's mission became even more complex. After being chosen as the guardians by the wizard's spirit, the three friends found themselves drawn deeper into the Shadow Forest. The forest began to whisper secrets to them that no one had known before, and with every step, they faced new adventures and puzzles. One day, in a previously unexplored part of the forest, they reached the shore of a mysterious lake. The lake's waters were dark and deep, and in the middle of the lake, there was an old island. On the island stood a forgotten temple. The temple's doors were sealed with magic that only the true guardians of the forest could open. The three friends worked together to uncover the secrets of the forest and the temple. Using the nature spells the wizard had taught them, they finally managed to open the temple doors. Inside, they were met with a surprise. The temple was filled with ancient writings that told the history of the forest and how the wizard had protected it. As they studied the writings, they learned that the wizard had not only protected the forest, but had also been a great leader who brought peace and harmony among all the creatures in the forest. However, one day, due to a threat from the outside world, the wizard had to seal the forest and its secrets. With this new knowledge, the three friends took on the mission of restoring the forest's peace and reconnecting it with the outside world. Throughout their journey, they made friendships with the forest's inhabitants and worked to bring them together, keeping the wizard's legacy alive. As the secret of the Shadow Forest was unveiled, the forest came to life once again. The trees grew greener, flowers more vibrant, and animals happier. The forest, once feared, now stood beside the city as a wonder waiting to be discovered. And so, thanks to the courage and friendship of Alex, Bella, and Charlie, the secret of the Shadow Forest changed forever. Their story turned into a legend and became an inspiration for anyone who wanted to discover the forest's secrets.
Once upon a time, there was a big and beautiful apple tree. This tree became friends with a little boy. The boy would come every day to play around the tree, swinging from its branches, climbing its trunk, and making crowns from its leaves. The tree was very happy about this because spending time with the boy brought it great joy. The boy would rest in the tree's shade and eat its apples. The tree would do anything to make the boy happy, and this made the tree happy as well. But as time passed, the boy grew up and didn't visit the tree as often. The tree felt lonely without the boy, but whenever the boy returned, the tree did everything it could to help him. One day, the boy came back to visit the tree, and the tree was very happy.
"Come, climb my branches, play in my leaves, eat my apples, and be happy,"
said the tree. But the boy had grown up and didn't want to play anymore. He wanted money instead. When he asked how he could make money, the tree offered him its apples.
"Pick my apples, sell them in the city, and make money,"
said the tree. The boy picked the apples and went to the city. The tree was very happy to see the boy happy, but the boy didn't return for a long time. Years passed, and the boy, now a grown man, came back again. The tree was happy once more and invited him to climb its branches. But the man now wanted to build a family and a house, so the tree offered him its branches.
"Cut my branches, build a house with them,"
said the tree. The man cut the branches, built his house, and disappeared for a long time once again. The tree was lonely again, but knowing that the man was happy made the tree content. Years later, the boy, now an old man, came back once more. The tree was happy to see him, but by then, it didn't even have branches to invite him to climb. The old man was sad this time because he was now too old to play or work. He just wanted a place to rest. The tree in response said,
"I don't have anything left to give you. No more apples, no more branches, and not even my shade,"
said the tree. But the old man said, "I just need a place to sit and rest." The tree still wanted to help, so it offered one last thing.
"I have an old cut-down stump. You can sit on it and rest,"
said the tree. And the old man sat on the stump. The tree was very happy.
Now let's rewind and tell the story from the beginning. Once upon a time, there was a little girl who was loved by everyone who looked at her, but especially by her grandmother. Her grandmother loved her so much that she would give the little girl anything she wanted. Once she gave her a small red velvet hat, and because it suited her so well, the girl never wanted to wear anything else. So everyone called her Little Red Riding Hood. One day, her mother said to her, "Come, Little Red Riding Hood, here is a piece of cake and a bottle of wine. Take them to your grandmother. She is sick and weak, and these will make her feel better. Go before it gets hot, walk nicely and quietly, and don't stray from the path. Otherwise, you might fall and break the bottle, and then your grandmother will get nothing. And when you go into her room, don't forget to say, 'Good morning,' and don't look around in every corner before you do so." "I will be very careful," said Little Red Riding Hood to her mother, and she gave her hand. Grandmother lived in the forest, half a league away from the village. As soon as Little Red Riding Hood entered the forest, she met a wolf. Little Red Riding Hood didn't know what a wicked animal he was, so she wasn't afraid of him. "Good day, Little Red Riding Hood," said the wolf. "Thank you, wolf." "Where are you going so early, Little Red Riding Hood?" "To my grandmother's." "And what do you have in your apron?" "Cake and wine. Yesterday was baking day, so I'm bringing something good to my poor sick grandmother to help her feel strong again." "Where does your grandmother live, Little Red Riding Hood?" "A good quarter of a league further into the forest under the 3 big oak trees. Her house stands beneath them. You must know it," said Little Red Riding Hood. The wolf thought to himself, "What a tender young creature. She will be even tastier than the old woman. I must act cleverly so that I can catch both of them." So the wolf walked for a little while beside Little Red Riding Hood. Then he said, "Look, Little Red Riding Hood, how pretty the flowers are around here. Why don't you look around? And I don't think you hear how sweetly the birds are singing. You walk along as if you're going to school, yet it is so delightful here in the forest." Little Red Riding Hood lifted her eyes and saw the sunbeams dancing here and there through the trees, and pretty flowers were blooming everywhere. She thought, if I take some flowers to my grandmother, she will be very pleased. It is still early, so I will arrive on time. So she ran off the path into the forest to look for flowers. Whenever she picked one, she saw an even prettier one further on and ran after it, and so she went deeper and deeper into the forest. Meanwhile, the wolf ran straight to the grandmother's house and knocked at the door. "Who is there?" "Little Red Riding Hood," replied the wolf. "I have brought cake and wine. Open the door." "Lift the latch," called out the grandmother. "I am too weak and cannot get up." The wolf lifted the latch, the door opened, and without saying a word, he went straight to the grandmother's bed and ate her up. Then he put on her clothes, dressed himself in her cap, laid himself in bed, and drew the curtains. Little Red Riding Hood, however, had been running about picking flowers, and when she had gathered so many that she could carry no more, she remembered her grandmother and set out on her way. She was surprised to find the door of the house standing open, and when she entered the room, she felt very strange and thought to herself, "Oh dear, how uneasy I feel today, and at other times I like being with grandmother so much." She called out, "Good morning," but received no answer, so she went to the bed and drew back the curtains. There lay her grandmother with her cap pulled far over her face, looking very strange. "Oh, grandmother," she said, "what big ears you have." "The better to hear you with, my child," was the reply. "But grandmother, what big eyes you have," she said. "The better to see you with, my dear." "But grandmother, what big hands you have. The better to hug you with. Oh, but grandmother, what a terrible big mouth you have. The better to eat you with." Scarcely had the wolf said this than he jumped out of bed and swallowed up poor Little Red Riding Hood. The wolf, having satisfied his appetite, lay down again in bed, fell asleep, and began to snore very loudly. The huntsman was just passing by the house and thought, "How loudly the old woman is snoring. I must check to see if something is wrong." He went into the room, and when he came to the bed, he saw the wolf lying there. "So here you are, you old sinner," said the huntsman. "I have been looking for you for a long time." He was just about to fire his gun when he thought that the wolf might have eaten the grandmother and that she could still be saved. So, instead of shooting, he took a pair of scissors and began to cut open the wolf's stomach. After 2 cuts, he saw the red hood shining through, and after 2 more cuts, Little Red Riding Hood jumped out and cried, "Oh, how frightened I was! It was so dark inside the wolf." After that, the old grandmother came out alive too, but she could hardly breathe. Little Red Riding Hood quickly fetched some large stones and filled the wolf's belly with them. When the wolf woke up, he wanted to run away, but the stones were so heavy that he collapsed and died. The 3 were very happy. The huntsman took the wolf's skin, the grandmother ate the cake, and drank the wine that Little Red Riding Hood had brought. And Little Red Riding Hood thought to herself, "As long as I live, I will never leave the path again when my mother has forbidden me to do so."
Steel Fates, the life of a worker. At the end of the 1880s, cold Chicago winds blew against Henry Mitchell's face as he walked, tired, through the massive factory doors of the Pullman Palace Car Company. Henry was just one of the thousands of workers employed there, but to him, it wasn't just a workplace. It was a place where his struggle for survival played out. Henry had moved his family from a small farm to the city and found work at this factory in Chicago. With newborn twin daughters and his sick wife Mary to care for, he worked 6 days a week, 12 hours a day. However, even his wages were not enough to cover the rent for the expensive house they were forced to live in, inside the Pullman town. The rent was deducted directly from his paycheck, leaving Henry and the other workers barely enough to survive. In 1893, a nationwide economic crisis hit. The Pullman Company suffered huge losses as a result. To handle these financial troubles, the company passed the burden onto the workers by significantly cutting their wages. It became nearly impossible for Henry to support his family. He and his fellow workers didn't know what to do, always filled with worry. What if they lost their home? What if they couldn't feed their children? Strike and hope. One morning, one of Henry's co-workers whispered that a large strike was about to begin. The workers had gained the support of Eugene V. Debs, the leader of the American Railway Union, and had decided they could no longer endure the pay cuts. Henry understood the risks of joining the strike, but he had nothing left to lose. As he looked at his children, he realized they deserved a better future, and he decided to join the strike. The strike began and quickly spread. Railroad traffic came to a halt, and Chicago's streets filled with workers. However, the government saw the strike as an unacceptable rebellion. President Cleveland ordered the army to intervene. Henry stood shoulder to shoulder with his comrades in the strike area when he heard gunshots echo through the streets. The army had come to break the strike by force. During the chaos, Henry was injured and collapsed to the ground. A bitter end and a new beginning. When Henry returned home wounded, his wife Mary greeted him with tears in her eyes. As he healed, the strike came to an end, and the workers had largely failed. However, Henry and his fellow workers' sacrifices were not in vain. In response to this tragedy, the government declared Labor Day a national holiday. Despite the hardships, Henry felt some comfort knowing that the voice of the working class had finally been heard. Life had never been easy, but Henry had done everything he could to ensure a better future for his children. Labor Day would continue to tell his and other workers' stories. Every year, on the first Monday of September, a glimmer of hope would light up Henry's heart. Maybe one day, workers could live in a fairer world. As the sun began to set over the quiet streets of a small town, the cool air and the faint whistling of the wind created a gloomy atmosphere. Tom, as usual, was chasing Jerry, but this time the chase felt different. It was as if this endless cycle was about to come to an end. Tom, with weary steps, followed Jerry's footprints, a determination in his eyes that was unusual. Tom and Jerry had been chasing each other for years, but this time both of them felt that something was about to change. Jerry was faster, more agile, but instead of his usual playful manner, he was leading Tom with a serious expression. The chase led them outside the town, towards an old and abandoned railway track. This railway line had been out of use for years, a place where no train passed anymore. But as they walked along the tracks, both characters felt that something was wrong here. As Tom ran quickly along the tracks, he tried to catch the shadow of Jerry, who was constantly dancing in front of him. But this time, it seemed as though Jerry wanted Tom to catch him. There was no escape plan, just a steady pace forward. As they moved along the tracks, the sky grew darker and a mist began to settle. This mist shortened their visibility and made the atmosphere even more unsettling. Tom tried to set up his usual traps to catch Jerry, but each time, he failed. It was as if Jerry knew Tom's moves in advance and easily dodged the traps. But these escapes were different from usual. Tom had never seen Jerry so calm and composed. The railway crossed over a bridge, and the river beneath, even in the darkness, looked menacing. Jerry stopped in the middle of the tracks and allowed Tom to catch up to him. Tom, as if mesmerized, walked towards Jerry. When the two met in the middle of the bridge, Tom hesitated for a moment. Normally, when he caught Jerry, he would immediately attack, but this time he just stared. There was a deep sorrow in Jerry's eyes. Standing in the middle of the bridge, Tom and Jerry looked at each other beyond everything else, and from a distance, they heard a sound. This sound was a faint rustle coming from the depths of the old, rusty train tracks. Tom looked around to find the source of the sound, but visibility was too limited. For a moment, Jerry lowered his head and sat down in the middle of the tracks. Tom was surprised. Jerry always ran, never gave up. Tom took a few steps and sat down next to Jerry. As they sat on the tracks, the world around them fell silent. The distant sound seemed to be getting closer. Tom realized that a train was approaching, but he made no attempt to get up. Jerry, however, remained completely still. The metallic rustling on the train tracks was now quite close. Tom turned his head to look in the direction the train was coming from. The mist hadn't yet revealed the silhouette of the train, but the sound was growing more intense. As Tom looked at Jerry, he couldn't fully grasp the reality of the moment. They were not just enemies. They were two beings whose existence gave meaning to each other. Without Jerry, there would be no Tom. And without Tom, there would be no Jerry. Finally, the train's lights appeared from within the mist. The railway began to tremble, but Tom and Jerry remained seated. Both of them knew now that this chase had to come to an end. The train approached quickly. Its sound reached a deafening intensity. As the train sped over the bridge, the shaking of the bridge, the metallic sounds on the tracks, and the roar of the train drowned out everything. Tom and Jerry's presence was swallowed up by the intensity of the train, disappearing into a veil of mist. After the train passed, only silence and emptiness remained on the bridge. As the mist slowly cleared, there was no trace of Tom and Jerry on the bridge. The tracks, as silent and abandoned as before, shivered in the cold wind. The sun fully retreated below the horizon, and darkness enveloped the town. That night, no one would ever truly know what happened on that old bridge. Tom and Jerry's final journey would remain as the last act of an endless story. Thanks for watching my video. Don't forget to subscribe.